By the morning of the second day, around 9:00 a.m. from afar, we heard the sound of a small engine. Now we know it was the sound of a chainsaw. When we followed that sound, immediately striking our eyes was an area where people were felling trees. Haven't identified which soldiers yet. Observing from afar, we saw them wearing horse-dung green clothes, peaked caps, generally looking somewhat like Saigon puppet soldiers. We lay observing very carefully because our observation point was slightly higher than the other side. To get to the other side, we had to cross a gentle slope to a stream, and then up the slope on the other side. Far away, behind the area where they were sawing trees, was a gentle hill stripped of trees, red earth, dug up messily and zigzagging. Probably the enemy's bunker and trench area. With the naked eye, our soldiers could only observe that much. The officers observed with binoculars and discussed pointing on the map. We lay observing movement with binoculars and naked eyes for over an hour. Now they decided to send 6 guys to advance a bit closer to the area, including me and D. When we got close to the stream, all of us started to become reptiles, just slithering inch by inch. When about 5 meters from the stream, D stopped hiding in a dense bush. I crawled up, lying slightly behind him. Seeing him wave for me to come up, the 2 of us lay observing along the stream for any movement. Very worried at that time. Meanwhile, the 4 guys behind were hidden in the scrub bushes. And do you know what was tormenting the 2 of us then? Black ants looking for food. The maddening thing was they didn't bite, but just crawled around, exploring our bodies, ticklish and uncomfortable. Observing from far to near, no movement. At that time, D looked up to observe once more, then stared straight ahead and signaled for me to look in the direction he pointed. My face went pale green. In front, just about 2 spans away, about a span high, was a green tripwire hidden in the tangled vines. The mine lay right near me on the left. The 2 of us nodded at each other, let's bolt. So we started crawling backward a bit before daring to turn around to crawl behind the group of 6. When we had crawled back to a slightly safe position, we dared to stoop and run back to where our comrades were waiting. Truly a close call. Then we continued hiding in the bushes to observe. About 2:00 p.m. our team withdrew from that area. Meanwhile, to our left, the sound of chainsaws was still echoing loudly. Only when the chainsaw sound faded did the tension ease. Now we just worried about observing ahead to place our feet in the right spot. Fumbling like that until more than 5:00 p.m., we still hadn't escaped that forest. It gets dark fast indeed. We had to rest here. 2 soldiers observed on their own, finding a tree stump to determine direction, then spreading raincoats as mats. Guard duty was divided into 3 teams, forming a triangle for mutual protection in case of night combat. The gloomy, quiet forest brought a ticklish, tense feeling. After a day of tiring and anxious jungle trekking, now sleep was fitful and uneasy. Occasionally a burst of gunfire or mine explosions would make us jump. Another night passed in the forest. The sky began to lighten dimly. We still couldn't continue. A thick fog blanketed the forest. It wasn't until about 8:00 a.m. that we started moving. Trees began to thin out. It was much brighter in the forest, but the walking speed was still very slow because we had to observe. At about more than 10:00 a.m. in the wind, we smelled the faint scent of mild, very fragrant tobacco. Just a whiff. The olfactory sense of addicts is truly sharp. The brothers immediately spread out to find dense bushes to hide. At that time, a division scout and I were ordered to advance to observe. Just crawling up about 40 meters, we heard murmuring sounds echoing from the right. The 2 of us lay dead still in the bushes. A while later, we saw on the trail ahead a group of about 15 people, both men and women, young and old. Clothes were soldier green and the black of pot soldiers. They carried belongings in bundles on their heads and baskets on their backs. There were only about 3 or 4 K-63 rifles. They were walking on a trail only about 1 meter wide and talking very lively. The 2 of us held our breath watching. When they had gone out of sight, we retreated to the rear, waiting a bit more for that group to go far before organizing to cross the trail. Crossing to the other side, the 2 guys behind us had to erase all traces. By the afternoon, we still hadn't reached the position marked on the map because we encountered quite a few uncertainties on the way. Those guys drew on the map and deployed missions, but did they go in reality with us to know? At that time, our team had to stop in a dipterocarp forest with lots of bamboo grass. Now a difficult problem came to us: water. At noon, we had each filled a canteen, but by now at most anyone had only about 1/3 left. Because nerves were so tense all day, no one thought about water. Now thinking about it, well, use whatever is left and must be extremely sparing too. So taking out a pack of dried rice, pouring just about 2 canteen caps of water, then kneading for a while. It became pliable, almost like sticky rice, not too bad. As long as the stomach wasn't empty, it was fine. Another night passed in fitful, anxious sleep. Early the next morning we woke up and continued marching. Not until about 10 a.m. did we reach the designated position on the map. All teams were safe, we had completed the mission in name, but later when reporting how the team leader would report was up to them, while US soldiers did not participate. Our team returned to the unit's rest stop. The other teams had also returned since noon. All brothers had completed the mission, and importantly, no casualties occurred. We were given a few days of rest. But there were still teams going on mission, which were the scouts from the division and scouts from Regiment 270. During the few days of waiting for the other teams to return, we only had sporadic activities around the billeting area. Then the other teams also returned safely the next morning. We were ordered to withdraw troops this time on the way back. Leading was the scouts of Regiment 270, followed by the division scout formation. While we marched at the end of the formation, we did not return by the old route, but cut across in front of the infantry company outpost formation of Regiment 271. The upper line at the same time at about 10 a.m. as deployed by about 11 a.m. We would reach that infantry outpost. Suddenly in front an explosion rang out, followed by chaotic shouts of mines. Mines, mines. We only knew to stand still in place, and since we were marching at the rear of a formation, we did not know what was happening in front. Too tired, we sat down to rest right at our positions, not daring to move around or gather to smoke any more, sitting and waiting about 15 or 20 minutes. Later, after the first aid work was done, we continued marching, passing the place where the mine just exploded. We only saw scattered bandages stained with much blood, then heard passed down that one of our soldiers had lost a leg near the knee, and one was lightly wounded, stepping on a mine triggering it. By then it was noon, tired and hungry, but we still were not allowed to stop to set up for cooking. We still had to continue marching until the first outpost of Regiment 270, and then that outpost also appeared. We were allowed to rest and cook, while the scouts of Regiment 270, along with a few infantry brothers in that outpost, had the task of rushing the wounded to surgery. Until about 2 p.m. we continued marching after parting with that outpost team, seeing the faces of the infantry brothers drooping like soaked rice crackers, because perhaps initially they thought we would stay overnight there. This time we walked on the road we had taken days ago, a road used for logging trucks, so it was easy to walk at this time. We only worried about stepping on pressure mines, but because the road was open and wide, we did not have to worry about tripwires. The closer we got, the more excited we became. By about 5 p.m. we stopped to rest at an infantry company outpost. By this time, we were too tired, so after eating, a few guys from my unit found a place with tree stumps near the company command post, spread raincoats, wrapped mosquito nets as blankets to avoid mosquitoes, and slept until morning, although during the night occasionally we were startled by mine explosions and gunfire from sentries, but lying here was safe, so we just slept on carelessly. On the second day of the return trip, around nearly noon, we passed the stream where a few days ago the jungle flood rose high. Now it was flowing gently with clear water. We stopped to rest for lunch and took the opportunity to bathe freely. I took the chance to stop by my compatriot's place to hang out. After lunch, we continued marching past several outposts of direct subordinate companies of Regiment 270. By late afternoon, we all arrived at the regiment headquarters of Regiment 270. Then we rested in the regiment headquarters assembly hall that night. We hung hammocks early to rest, until about 5 a.m. when I woke up startled by chaotic explosions of various ammo ringing out at the outpost in front. Then firepower and small arms rang out urgently and rapidly. It took about 30 minutes later for the gunfire to sparse out and silence. I returned to the hammock, but could not sleep anymore, lying there, tossing and turning until fully light, getting up to boil a pot of water to make instant noodles for the guys. Those guys could not sleep either, seeing them tossing in hammocks continuously after breakfast without waiting for the division scouts. A few of us from the regiment headquarters of 270 started marching back to Ndong. We were somewhat reassured because on this route there were outposts of direct subordinate companies of Regiment 270 and 250. About nearly 9 a.m. we arrived at the A and Dong intersection. This place was the forward division Headquarters of Division 341 and the regiment headquarters of Regiment 250 stationed. The 6 of us rested here waiting to see if any group returning to Regiment 266 would join us to travel in a larger group. Waiting for a while, a group of soldiers from Transport Company 25 bringing Martyrs of Battalion 8 out appeared asking around. I learned the martyr was Ngat, also nicknamed Angatsom from Than Hoa, a soldier from 75 previously in Battalion 8. Headquarters with me later when I went up to the regiment scouts. Ngat went down to Company 5 by about 10 a.m. We started marching at that time. There were about 15 soldiers in total on both sides of the road. Were dense banana forests, very difficult to observe. Far the road used for trucks had now become mounds and trenches in the middle of the road. Grass grew green because no vehicles had passed for a long time, stumbling up and down steps high and low, laboriously fearing stepping on mines. Then passing about more than 3 p.m. we arrived at the unit, ending a deep penetration scout trip. After that trip, because it was the rainy season, we only had to sweep and search around the unit's stationing area, extending a bit further, but not surpassing the regiment headquarters formation by much. Time passed, slowly in anxiety and boredom, then joyous news, spread by word of mouth, arrived. The unit was preparing to withdraw. Oh my God, withdrawing from that malaria-ridden jungle region was too joyous. Time flew, and all of us had been on the road in that malaria-navel region for over a year now. The face of every soldier was beaming, so we lived in anxious expectation. And then the awaited day arrived, so nervous when that evening officers from platoon and squad went to a meeting at the company headquarters. Looking at their faces, we knew immediately all of us sat in the bunker listening to the plan for tomorrow. A sleepless night, tossing and turning for several guys. They just lay there but could not sleep, occasionally hearing the creaking of sleeping platforms, waiting for morning just like them, wishing for dawn. Quickly, guard duty at this time needed no reminders. Our lives and brothers' lives were paramount. Everyone was very self-disciplined. Before being called, they were already up, unlike other days, having to be called 5 or 7 times without seeing them come out, just lying in the mosquito net, dreaming, thinking of the day, returning to family. Even the soldier on the last shift at dim light was briskly starting the fire to boil water to fill canteens for brothers, unlike previous days. Don't dream of it, must say. The lazy guy today was suddenly diligent and didn't have to wait for logistics to call for breakfast. He automatically went up there to wait today if the rice was burnt. We would only march hungry after breakfast. Some brothers went to logistics to divide food supplies. To platoons for carrying. Others were ordered to stay and destroy all bunkers, trenches and outposts, simply destroying quickly the bunker house, just pulling out a few support stakes for it to collapse. While combat fortifications were collapsed cursorily, yet later a compatriot from my neighborhood in Regiment 250 passing this area was ambushed by pot troops, using the exact old trench, and was wounded here. Returning to the story, that day about more than 8 a.m. soldiers from regiment headquarters sections passed our unit, then direct subordinate companies withdrew, rolling up, while our company 20 withdrew after direct subordinate companies, and finally soldiers of battalion 8 companies. When we passed units of regiment 250, they looked at us with sad faces. The road from Samrat out, we were marching orderly in combat formation, but starting from Ndong intersection out, it was very chaotic. Platoons and companies urged soldiers to march correctly in formation, but only for a moment before becoming chaotic again. Every soldier carried on his back about 30 or 40 kilograms, including gun and ammo. Why so strong? Only those suffering from malaria swaying had to lag behind, then join the formation of Battalion 8. When stopping to rest in the middle of the road, checking again, we found a few weak guys missing, currently walking behind the officers. Made us stop to wait. When they arrived, looking at their faces felt so pitying, so we all shared their load, carrying more so those sick guys at this time only had guns and ammo vests. On the way out to the V-shaped curve, we met soldiers of Regiment 250, reinforcing the formation, filling the gaps, when our units withdrew by about 4 or 5 p.m. Our company 20 had gathered fully at the submerged crossing near the V-shaped curve. At this time, our soldiers freely talked and laughed and sang loudly, our entire unit stationed west of the crossing by the stream bank, but with many big trees on the right and left, were dense reeds. After bathing freely and having dinner, we gathered the whole company to hear the situation and direction for unit stationing. So at this time, we lay west of the stream, protecting the front for the regiment headquarters, along with a few direct subordinate companies, and feeling even more reassured was that right in front of our company, only about 100 meters away, was the formation of Battalion 8, stretched in an arc. That night guard duty was assigned properly, but whether the guys guarding later executed the duty or not, only heaven and the jungle knew. After guarding, I immediately got on the hammock and slept a stretch, until broad daylight. Before waking up, we were only allowed to rest there for 2 days, but those 2 days for us were a soldier's paradise: eating, drinking, bathing, resting freely, lacking only one thing: green vegetables. At that time we did not visit compatriot brothers, fearing if something boomed more than ever now our lives must be safe to return to mother. Then we were ordered to pack up and march to the rear, closer to the V-shaped curve. Not knowing how many kilometers we walked, we stopped and started deploying on both sides of the road, and staying there very impatient. Getting out meant getting out completely rather than hesitating like this, making every nerve jumpy. Meanwhile, up on the border, day and night, loud explosions were still echoing here, and a vague worry rushed in, not knowing if brothers of other units up there could hold out or if we were lying here waiting for something to turn back to reinforce brothers. Only a few days here, but information from staff officers was constantly jammed, sometimes turning back to the San Samlat, sometimes waiting for trucks to shift wings. It's generally information was chaotic. Then one day at noon we continued marching, still heading toward the V-shaped curve. That afternoon our unit stopped to rest at a small village on the left of the road. This village only had about more than 10 rooftops, no civilians, but looked open and clean. Observing this village, surely a unit of our division had just withdrawn about a few days ago, because we saw inside houses and in yards soldier items still scattered. That night we slept on stilt houses, but guard duty was strictly forbidden to be neglected. But guard duty was only perfunctory. Guards just went out to sit on the stairs looking at the sky, watching stars, when time came calling the next guy to replace about 3 or 4 a.m. After guarding, lying down, unable to sleep, tossing and turning, while up on the border explosions were still echoing loudly. The cooks had woken up to cook rice, preparing for breakfast. Sky not yet clear. The last shift guard went up to receive rations. After eating, we marched out to the road a few dozen meters away to wait for trucks. Only a while later, trucks arrived to pick us up. All our Company 20 got on a liberation truck, still spacious and comfortable. Then the truck started rolling, reaching the V-shaped curve. The truck turned left, heading toward Battambang, not knowing how many trucks before and after, but I only saw a long line of headlights shining. Meanwhile, civilians on both sides of the road had also woken up, standing by the roadside watching the convoy, only a few hands waving. Seeing off the convoy, perhaps civilians were still sleepy, looking bewildered at the convoy carrying Vietnamese volunteer soldiers. Going where? Then the truck stopped near a railroad track. All of us got off, continuing to march on foot along the track. That night we rested along the track. There was a civilian road cutting across the track. On this side of the track, nearly a kilometer away, was a village, while on the other side was a path into a dipterocarp forest. After chewing through a pack of dried rice, I spread a raincoat by the track edge for a sleep until hearing the clattering of ox carts crossing the stone road. Waking me up, sky was dim, faces not yet clear. We were bustling, calling each other up. Meanwhile, the Cambodian civilians also seemed surprised. Encountering so many Vietnamese soldiers here, they sneakingly struggled to crawl past quickly to get away from this position. Then, when fully light, we continued following the track until about 9 a.m. We stopped at an open ground that was an old train station, abandoned long ago, only the platform remaining standing, waiting for the train. Oh, how long then? Finally the whistle blew. A train arrived, but entirely cargo cars. In front of the engine were 2 empty flat cars, exactly like cars used to carry rocks for track repair. Now the first car carried only dipterocarp leaves, probably a car used to detonate anti-tank mines, while the second car had combat fortifications erected on it. There were several heavy machine guns, light machine guns, and an 82mm recoilless rifle. Then all of us were ordered to board the train. Being all cargo cars, inside was hot and stifling. I crawled out to sit huddled near the car door, sitting right at the door, dared not for fear of flying arrows and stray bullets. More than ever now was the time to protect my life. First passing through dipterocarp forests, I saw many soldiers standing guard west of the road to protect the track. The train ran very slowly. Because the track was bad, I saw a road guard soldier looking after the train. That gaze until today is still imprinted deep in me, a gaze following the train, sad, craving, wishing. Until today, when I sit writing these lines, I still pray that soldier returned to his family and is now healthy. The train still slowly moved at this time. The mood of brothers was very happy, wishing the train would run faster. However, the train continued to roll slowly, making us even more impatient. The train continued to move through abandoned fields and forests, filled with low-lying oil trees. In the forests, to the west, a few dozen meters from the railway line, were soldiers from friendly units performing guard duty to protect the train, ensuring our unit could withdraw safely. I will never forget the sad eyes watching the train go by that afternoon. I remember the eyes of the guard soldier as the train passed the position of the 12.4 outpost. One soldier stood up and waved, watching our train until it disappeared. Overnight on the train in the late afternoon, as the sun set in the west, the train stopped for a rest. All of us got off the train to prepare dinner and our overnight position. To the east of the railway line was an abandoned field with shallow water. Soldiers went there to fetch water for cooking. To the west was a forest of oil trees where infantry units were stationed to guard the train. The subordinate companies were probably also stationed around this area. Our 20th Company did not have to leave the train. We stayed in our original positions, lining up along the eastern side of the railway line. Those who were quick found a spot to hang their hammocks right under the train cars. As for me and a few other soldiers who had nowhere to hang a hammock, we had no choice but to spread our raincoats under the train car to sleep. Even though the railway gravel poked our backs uncomfortably, it didn't matter as long as our lives were safe. I don't remember if any guards were posted, but that night I slept soundly until morning when the others woke me up. The train then slowly started moving again. As we passed through an oil tree forest, a burst of sharp gunfire suddenly rang out. The train stopped, and then a moment later it started moving again. Later we heard that it was a burst of gunfire fired either by Cambodian guerrillas or Pol Pot soldiers that hit the train, killing one of our soldiers. The train immediately stopped for our soldiers to pursue, but the enemy had disappeared into the forest. Temporary stop and farewell that evening, we arrived at our destination. The train stopped in an open area with a railway line branching off to the right. We followed that branch line for about 20 minutes until we reached a tall, large building. At first glance it looked like a warehouse, but later we learned it was a train repair workshop. However, nothing of the repair shop remained, only 2 trenches, probably used by mechanics working under the train cars. These 2 trenches were filled with rainwater that had collected over a long time, and the water was clear. It seemed that the subordinate companies and the regimental headquarters were also stationed nearby because our 20th Company only occupied a small corner, yet there were so many soldiers inside. The surrounding area was all rice fields, and the rice was nearly ripe. The most difficult problem for us soldiers at that moment was fuel. We soon found a solution to that difficulty: the wooden crossbeams of the railway tracks out there. A few of us would just go out and casually dismantle them, but only from the branch line here. No one dared to touch the main line heading to Phnom Penh. During the days we rested there, we often went to a nearby market to trade with the Cambodian people. Some guys traded for this and that. I didn't know what to trade, but I got 2 very nice thigh flip-top lighters. Our soldiers at that time didn't have a penny, so we had to trade whatever we had. Arriving at this market, everything looked strange and beautiful, as if we had fallen from the moon. I craved everything from the iced sugarcane juice to the fragrant Sammic cigarettes, but where would I get the money? I don't know about other units, but for our unit this was the first time in more than 2 years in Cambodia that we had such extensive contact with the local people. The soldiers, having been in the jungle for a long time, gathered around the fair-skinned Cambodian girls, haggling and joking, mainly to tease them even though we didn't have a penny in our pockets. The final journey home, we stayed there for a few days. On a few nights a film crew came to show movies, which was a great pleasure. I had forgotten what movies were like a long time ago, ever since I joined the army. Just like children, we would call out to each other excitedly every evening to find a spot to watch the film. We stayed here for about 3 or 4 days. Then one morning we were woken up. After eating, we marched to the main road. As soon as we got there, we saw a long line of trucks waiting. Soldiers began loading their gear onto the trucks. Shouts echoed everywhere. Our 20th Company boarded a GIPN truck. Once the formation was stable, the truck started moving while it was still dark. The convoy drove straight through Phnom Penh city and continued east along Highway 1 toward Vietnam. Now, knowing for sure that we were returning to the motherland, we were overjoyed. All worries were erased. In the truck, the soldiers laughed and chatted happily. The truck drove relatively slowly because the road was bumpy with many potholes. Sitting in the truck with the cool breeze blowing, my heart sank suddenly. The unit was missing too many comrades on the day we returned to the motherland. The truck passed through the former battlegrounds areas where my unit and others had fought fiercely and sacrificed to win every rice field, every dike, every village from the enemy. Now life seemed to have changed a lot. People waved at the convoy on both sides of the road. There were no flags or flowers, no farewell handshakes. This is Svei Rieng. The memories of the past rushed back. Oh, how devastating this war was, how many of my comrades had fallen on this borderland, how many of my comrades had been brought back to the motherland, and how many more comrades' bones are still lying somewhere yet to be found. Farewell, a wounded nation, a land devastated by war. Returned to Vietnam, the truck drove straight to the Moc Bai border gate and did not stop for inspection of personal belongings. Why? Because the unit was always fighting deep in the jungle. Where would we get gold to inspect? Everyone was pale from malaria. Late that afternoon, my unit arrived at the Long Bin base, which was now the rear base of the division. Our company was housed in an old prefabricated wooden building left by the former Saigon regime. The surroundings were quite bare, but that was already good enough. Nearby, a stream flowed over the paved road so the soldiers could bathe and wash freely. Besides 3 meals, we often gathered in groups to go to the Teen Hyap market to play. Our main treat at the time was still sugarcane juice. One night we heard a loud clatter of banging coming from the 2 satellite dishes left by the old regime. The next morning we saw that the sheet metal covering the satellite dishes was missing. We knew that our soldiers had climbed up and dismantled it to sell to the locals for money to spend. We rested here for about 2 or 3 days. Then a truck came to pick us up and take us to Bien Hoa Station for the train north. Thus we concluded the war to protect the southwestern border and help the Cambodian people escape the Pol Pot genocide. And now it was time to return to Mother. You have just finished listening to Part 11, which is the final part of the memoir by author Tran Ngoc Quang. Thank you very much for taking the time to follow along. If you found it interesting, please remember to subscribe to support the channel and follow the upcoming parts. Once again, thank you very much and goodbye.